History isn't always shaped in shining halls or royal courts. Sometimes it's shaped in mud. Thick, choking, soul-breaking mud. And in the fall of 1415, on a narrow stretch of farmland in northern France, that mud would swallow thousands of men, shatter a kingdom's pride, and carve into time one of the most astonishing military upsets the world has ever seen. This is the story of Agincourt, where a sick, exhausted English army faced a French force nearly 3 times its size and somehow walked away victorious. You're watching Timeless Whispers. Let the past speak again. Before arrows flew, before armor clashed, France was already bleeding from the inside. In the early 1400s, the French kingdom was powerful but fractured. 2 rival factions, the Armagnacs and the Burgundians, were at each other's throats. The king, Charles VI, suffered terrifying bouts of mental illness. Sometimes he forgot he was king. Sometimes he forgot he had children. This wasn't just political drama. This was a kingdom in chaos. And across the channel, one man saw opportunity. Henry V of England. Young, tough, battle-hardened, and convinced that parts of France, especially Normandy, rightfully belonged to him by inheritance. But claims on paper don't move borders. Armies do. So in August 1415, Henry crossed the channel with about 12,000 soldiers. Not to raid, not to negotiate, but to make France bow. Henry's first target was Harfleur, a fortified port city. The siege dragged on for more than a month, longer than Henry expected. The muddy trenches filled with filth, and disease spread like wildfire. Most English soldiers weren't killed by French swords, but by dysentery. Imagine thousands of men dehydrated, feverish, barely able even to walk, yet still expected to fight. By the time Harfleur finally surrendered, Henry had lost 1/3 of his army. Now his mission had changed. He wasn't marching toward domination, he was marching to survive. Henry decided to lead his weakened army north toward the English-held city of Calais. A long march through enemy territory, dangerous but necessary. France saw its chance. The French nobles rallied. Knights from across the kingdom rode toward one goal: intercept Henry V, trap him, crush him. This wouldn't be a battle of strategy, it would be a hunt. On October 24th, Henry's army reached a narrow field near the small village of Agincourt. Ahead of them, a dense French force blocking the road to Calais. Behind them, forests and countryside filled with more French patrols. There was no escape, no side path, no trick. Henry had to fight. But here's the twist. The battleground wasn't chosen by Henry, it was chosen by France. And ironically, it would doom them. Agincourt was a long, narrow field, pinched by forests on both sides. It had been plowed recently. The soil was soft, heavy, and the night before the battle, it rained. Not a drizzle, a cold, relentless autumn downpour. The field became a swamp. For most armies, this was miserable. For the heavily armored French knights, some carrying 60, 70 pounds of steel, it was catastrophic. But Henry saw opportunity. The morning of October 25th, St. Crispin's Day, was quiet. The French knights stood in bright armor decorated with heraldic colors. They looked like a wall of metal stretching across the horizon, tens of thousands strong, confident, proud, ready to crush the English once and for all. The English, they looked like the underdogs of underdogs. Many had bandages around their stomachs and legs. Most were longbowmen, farmers, laborers, commoners with bows, not nobility. Henry stood among them, wearing not a shining crown, but a battle helmet scratched by previous wars. He wasn't a distant king watching from a hill. He was in the mud, shoulder to shoulder with his men. Then, Henry did something unusual. He ordered wooden stakes to be hammered into the mud in front of the English lines, angled forward, sharpened, deadly. This small preparation would save England, because Henry wasn't planning to wait for a heroic cavalry charge. He was preparing a trap. The French wanted a glorious night-on-night attack, something worthy of chivalry. But Henry didn't care about chivalry. He cared about survival. When he gave the order, English archers stepped forward, pulled their bowstrings, and unleashed hell. A wall of arrows whistled through the cold air, hundreds every second, darkening the sky, slicing into French formations. Armor couldn't fully stop an English longbow arrow. It could punch through visors, joints, weak spots. French horses panicked. Men reeled under the unexpected storm. The French commanders had no choice. They ordered the advance. The French knights moved forward, but the field betrayed them. Every step sank them deeper into the mud. Every stride was a battle. Their armor weighed them down. Their horses slipped, fell, crashed into each other. This wasn't a charge. This was a slow, torturous crawl. And all the while, the arrows kept coming. Imagine standing in 70 pounds of steel, waist-deep in mud, while arrows slam into your helmet like hail. The French line lost momentum, lost shape, lost breath. Men fell and couldn't get up. Others tripped over bodies and tumbled face first into the muck. And still, the English kept shooting. The enemy had turned themselves into a wall of metal, and the mud turned that wall into a trap. This part of the battle is almost unimaginable today. Hundreds of French knights drowning not in water, but in mud. They struggled, suffocated, choked behind steel helmets. Some suffocated simply because they fell and couldn't lift their heads. And English archers saw their chance. With arrows running low, they grabbed hammers, axes, and knives, tools, not elegant weapons, and waded into the chaos. French knights worth small fortunes were hacked down by farmers. Blood mixed with mud. Steel rang against bone. Screams echoed across the field. Chivalry died that day, but England lived. The French second and third battle lines tried to push forward, but the field was already clogged with bodies. Men slipped on corpses. Horses refused to advance. The living were dragged down by the dying. By noon, the French army was a disaster, jammed, suffocating, broken. The English, meanwhile, were gaining momentum. Under Henry's command, they pressed forward, slowly, methodically. And then, the French line snapped. When the center broke, panic spread like fire through dry grass. Some French nobles tried to retreat, only to be trampled by their own men. Others fought to the end, screaming Henry's name in fury. But by early afternoon, the battle was over. Agincourt belonged to England. What happens after a battle can sometimes stain a king's legacy, and Agincourt had such a moment. Henry received reports that a group of French horsemen were attacking the English rear lines, trying to rescue nobles or disrupt supply wagons. Henry made a ruthless decision. He ordered the execution of French prisoners, hundreds of them, knights, nobles, men of enormous wealth and status. It was unthinkable in medieval warfare, but Henry wasn't thinking about honor. He was thinking about survival. If the French regrouped, he and all his men could die, so the order was carried out. It shocked Europe. It still sparks debate today. Was it brutality? Was it necessity? Was it both? Agincourt wasn't a romantic victory. It was a desperate one. The casualties tell the story. English dead, perhaps 400. French dead, between 6,000 and 10,000, including a massive portion of the French nobility. Entire generations of French aristocracy were wiped out in a single morning. Henry walked off that field a legend. France staggered away in shame. But here's the twist most people don't know. Agincourt didn't end the war, not even close. The 100 Years' War raged for decades afterward, yet Agincourt became a symbol of what discipline can do to arrogance, of what preparation can do to overconfidence, and of how a king can lead not from a throne, but from the mud. Today, Agincourt is remembered not just as a battle, but as a reminder. Sometimes the underdog wins. Sometimes courage beats numbers. Sometimes mud shapes history. And Henry's legend lived on, strengthened by Shakespeare, celebrated in stories, and etched into English identity. But it also changed France. The shock of Agincourt forced the French to rethink their military structure, their politics, and their entire way of waging war. Without Agincourt, France's later victories, from Joan of Arc to Castillon, might never have happened. History moves in strange loops. Defeat creates victories. Victory creates overconfidence. And sometimes, a rainy night creates legends. More than 6 centuries later, when you stand on the quiet farmland of Agincourt, you don't see a battlefield. You see fields, trees, wind. But if you listen closely, beyond the tractors and the birds, you can almost hear it. The thunder of hooves, the roar of arrows, the clanging of steel, the gasps of drowning knights, and the whisper of the rain that chose the fate of kingdoms. This has been Timeless Whispers. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten corners of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let the past speak again.